Welcome back to the Biz Apps Classroom. This series is all about training and learning, and it's produced as a partnership between 365.training and MS Dynamics World. I'm Jason Gumpert, and on this episode, my co-host Julie Yack and I welcome back Microsoft MVP George Doubinski to talk about learners for whom English is a second language. George has had recent experiences leading training with non-native English speakers, and he offers both practical suggestions for overcoming typical challenges and encouragement for those who feel discouraged or apprehensive about some of their experiences. George is also someone who learned English as a foreign language, and he recounts some of the techniques and approaches that helped him in years past, both with learning and with working in an English-first environment. All right, we're back. Hey, Julie. How's it going?
Hey, Jason. Good. Happy Monday. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. We saw each other recently, but we didn't manage to record an episode on site at our last conference together. But here we are back online and recording again, which is always great.
If I remember correctly, we saw each other on the casino floor by a slot machine.
Yeah, pretty much. As I was, I think, heading out the door to catch a flight.
Yes.
Something along those lines. Yeah, but it was a busy week. We can probably recap it some other time. But here we have a very special guest, a returning guest. It's George Doubinski. Hey, George.
Good morning.
Thanks for making the virtual trip here from many time zones away to be with us again. Remind us sort of who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me at that early hour in the morning in Sydney, but tomorrow. Right. But I've been MVP up. I actually changed the way I say it. I've been MVP since CRM 3.0 days. So that kind of has a nice ring to it. And that's pretty much it. I talk a lot. These days I run a lot and I learn and teach a lot. Can I just say that when I start this recording, it's got some medical vibe to it. It's a health check passed. I feel like I'm getting probed.
Yeah, that's all behind the scenes. You don't need to worry about any of that.
That's what my doctor told me.
Just feel a slight discomfort. And,
Well, and if you're watching the progression and the sounds, you can see the up and downs. It looks a whole lot like an EKG.
Yeah, it allows for all sorts of sound effects as the stress level changes here. But well, so great, yeah, and we had you here once before. You shared some really great lessons that you've learned and experiences that you've had, and I invite all our listeners to go back and check it out if you haven't. It was only a few weeks ago, really. Well, why are you back? What did you want to talk about coming back here today?
Oh, we did flag one topic that kind of dear to me and very relevant to learning and quite relevant to, I believe, to the crowd or cohort that usually handling these days. And that is learning as a non-native English speaker. That is when you come from non-English speaking background and you're trying to make your way through in our part of the vast technology world. I remember my own struggles with English being a second language. And it's quite important to understand what you can do, what you can't do, or what you basically can ignore. And a lot of people, they have this fear of speaking in English, even though, believe it or not, their English is quite good. As long as others can understand you, you're good to go. And that's important to know the ropes, so to speak, when you're learning as a non-native speaker. And as a trainer, I believe, Julie, that you know that teaching non-native speakers is somewhat different experience.
It is different, and especially if there's a presentation component to the training, which often is when we're talking with sales or pre-sales folks. I've had people do short presentations in their native language, even if I can't understand it, I want them to have the confidence to have the conversation. So I don't care if it's in my language or in your language. Let's have that conversation.
How how you as a teacher when someone presents a sales pitch, I assume as part of the training, how you as a teacher, what you looking for? What exactly you observe and watch, and what you grading as a teacher?
I want them to first and foremost sell the truth, and I want them to have confidence.
But
And
how do
that's
you know that they're telling the truth?
well, if it's the situation where someone is presenting in a different language, then it's on me as a trainer to be paying attention to conversations that happen before their presentation to make sure they get what's going on. And then the presentation is just the minor part of it.
Fair enough. I wonder how AI changes that. Like I remember years ago, I think you were there, Julie. It was MVP Summit, and we had mixed crowd. And for this particular year, we had a bunch of Japanese MVPs in the room. Quite a large crowd, so large enough. So Microsoft decided to switch on instant translation, whatever it was.
Yes, I
And I
remember
rem-
it very well.
and I remember that straight away, like within 20 seconds, you could hear giggles coming from that corner of the room where people were sitting, and I can understand completely that.
Well, it
Uh,
was talking about the session was about embedded apps. So this was years ago, so it's no longer considered secretive, but we were talking about embedded apps. So Canvas apps being embedded in a model driven app. And the captioning just kept calling them embed apps.
In bed apps.
So that's
that,
where the giggles were coming from.
that's in English, but there was another bunch of giggles coming from Japanese translation, and I asked Japanese friends that I knew, and they said like it's hard to explain, but it was hilarious in Japanese. Like it couldn't translate a thing. So how's it these days? Do you use AI to translate?
Um, we've tried some with our Ukrainian groups, and it's still a bit of a struggle because with the live translations, Teams doesn't do very well with in one language, out another. It wants everyone to speak the same language all the time and everyone to want the same translation. And that's a little bit unhelpful. But we
Hmm.
do use the translator connector for our assignments and our applications to translate in and out. So I can participate in English and they can participate in any language and it translates both directions. But that's written word, not spoken word.
Yeah, and those usually land much better. I assume. That's really interesting. I remember from teaching experiences that teaching people in non English speakers whilst you present in English is challenge for two things. For yeah, you see, yeah, even after all these years, I struggle with English because of two things. One is I remember that it's specifically prominent in countries where English is non-dominant language. Like if you go to Europe, particularly like Northern Europe, like everyone speaks English, pretty much everyone, and their English is like superb. Say much better than my English. You can hear light accent, but that's about it. The grammar they understand and the speaking patterns they superb. You go to different part of the world, like Southeast Asia, for example, and you find that languages are preserved. English is literally a second language, and it would be rare for people to speak fluently. They could read and understand, but their comprehension level is not the same. And what I found is that presentations become much slower. I remember presenting in Korea, and presentation that was literally like 30 minutes. They did warn me about it and said, "Hey, look, please allow some pauses." I was like, I would be speaking for about couple minutes, literally like a paragraph, or relay some thoughts on a subject, and then I would pause, and translator would kick in and just translate what I just said, not word for word, but just the meaning of it, so to let people to catch up if they miss something. That definitely slows down things a lot. That's one thing you have to cater for. The other side is you have to allow for cultural differences. If you teach in a different crowd, and you know that, Julie, particularly crowds, I keep referring to Southeast Asia because that's my part of the world, and that's where I do present and teach a fair bit. I'm actually, yeah, self-plug. I'm going to South Korea and then to Malaysia in about a couple of weeks' time, just over a couple of weeks, to present. There's a local conferences, and I do enjoy those. So when you present, and when you present to different crowd, you have to account for cultural differences, how you say things, how you address people, what to say, what not to say. For example, people in Japan, I remember, they're very difficult to engage on an individual level.
Yes. Well, and I remember teaching in India. It was between our Thanksgiving and Christmas. And all of the students came up and one at a time told me Merry Christmas because they recognized it was my holiday. It wasn't theirs. They weren't celebrating Christmas, but they knew that I would. So they very much, out of respect, wanted to make sure that I knew they were aware of that. And I really, really appreciated that welcome.
Well, as long as it doesn't get to the point where Santa Claus is on a cross.
That's a whole other conversation, George. Let's move on.
That was the side I will never forget. So it's kind of appealing to all the sides, mixing.
So, George,
to
as a non-native English speaker, have you found any particular strategies helpful for you to be able to have those public conversations about technology, how to be a better presenter, more comfortable with that?
Okay. Definitely. So one is go and watch a lot of good presenters, how they present, how they behave, how they maintain their speech patterns, how they maintain their presentation pace, and all the different aspects. Resources are immense, right? Apart from if you have an opportunity to go and watch live speakers, that's one thing. The other one is go and take a look at TED Talks. Those are typically pinnacles of good speaking engagements, right? They're very polished, they're very sharp, they're fast. Sometimes, sorry, fast as in they're very quick. They're over in 10-15 minutes. So you can see examples of good public speaking. So that's one. Just go and learn from others. The second best thing you can do is to co-present. If you find a native speaker who is willing to help you out, and we've got plenty of mentors in our community, go ahead, work with them. Take this opportunity and just work with them because they will help you out. That's their job as a mentor, to help you out with.
And here's my plug, George, is that I've been doing that. The last couple of years, I've specifically done session submissions with brand new speakers who are not native English speakers. And we've worked together and had presentations, and we're still submitting sessions together. So
Brilliant.
I love doing it.
Do you have any regrets doing that, though?
I do not. Actually, I don't. I have been fortunate that the women that I have been co-presenting with recently are very, very eager and hard workers and more than capable of doing it on their own. But it makes it more comfortable to have someone with you who can be there for the rescue if you think that you need it, even though you probably don't need it.
Yeah. Interesting enough, I remember you being upset with one of your co-presenters, but thinking back, your upset had nothing to do with the fact that they are non-native speaker. It was more with their desire to put extra work into things or not doing the work they were supposed to do before the talk, right? Rather than with the fact it's a human side of things, not the language side of things you
Correct.
were upset about.
Yes.
You would be equally upset, as you often are, with me not doing my part. Right? So that
Something
has...
that I've had students do also is after class, just take the lesson, go to Microsoft Learn or somebody's blog and read it out loud so that you get accustomed to saying those words out loud so that when you put them in your own context, it's easier for you to say them.
It's really interesting that you mentioned. I was just about to say that I can't vouch for all the languages, but I can give some tips to people who are Eastern European. It's not necessarily Russian. I'm native Russian speaker and I speak Russian, Ukrainian languages. But that the same applies to all Eastern European languages, specifically to Slavic languages, but to a large extent to others. Couple things that English speakers, native English speakers, are different from native speakers in, let's say, Slavic languages or Eastern European. Let's go broader, Eastern European languages. One is the emphasis is so important. It's less important in, let's say, Russian language. If you mispronounce or put the emphasis on the wrong syllable in a word, most likely Russian speaker will understand. I find that English native speakers often lost when you mispronounce the word. So I learned a trick. When you have longer words, when you're not quite sure, I mean, if you have time, look it up, learn the word. But the trick I learned, if there's more than 2 syllables, you put emphasis on all the syllables at the same time. You just slow down and you put emphasis wherever you want on all of them.
That's a good trick.
Yeah, it's like literally electrolytes. You're not sure if it's, well, this one is probably easy one, but you're not sure if it's electrolytes or electrolytes or whatever. It's not the best example, but just slow down and go like electrolytes. So you literally slow it down and spread it, so you will get much better understanding. I learned this trick, but slowing down and slowly pronouncing longer words give better opportunity for native speakers to adjust to your accent. Which leads me to another part. People concerned about their accents. Don't be. Because English is such a rich language in terms of accents as they exist. I remember like we were sitting in somewhere, I think it was in Dublin, and there was a guy across who was from Scotland, and he leans over to me and says, and I'm like, and I turn to
conversation.
Yeah, and I'm turning to a friend of mine who's like Irish, and I said, "What did he just say?" And my friend goes, "I have no idea." so sometimes it's just the English speakers can't understand each other. So don't worry about accents, right? What is important though, when you start your presentation, slow down a bit, let people, you will see frowns. They're not frowning at you. They concentrate on trying to adjust their perception to your specific accent. I see it all the time. Even now, my accent is now very confusing because it's got Eastern European whiff to it, but it also has Australian inflections because I've been in Australia for too long. People get confused. What the heck is this accent, right? So for the first like 2-3 minutes, I can see people concentrating, and you'll get the same. For the first few minutes, people will concentrate trying to understand, to adjust their hearing to your accent. So don't be put off by people frowning, by people, scowling and making all sort of faces. They're adjusting their hearing for the first 5 minutes, right? So slow down for the first 5 minutes, and then you're going to be good. And people underestimate their level of English. You'll be fine. Trust me. It's just, yeah, people will do their best to adjust. And if you're expert in those fields, and I know most of you are, it's gonna be just fine. Just concentrate on what you know best on technology.
Well, and I know as a native English speaker, I do not for one moment take for granted the fact that so many people speak my native language. I understand that it's a great privilege that it's not afforded to everyone, and I get that. And I am forever grateful for anyone who makes the attempt to communicate with me in English. It amazes me when I get that from people.
Yeah, there is this anecdote or whatever you want to call it. It's a bit rough, but gets the point across when someone says, when non-native English speaker says, we speak in English, not because I can speak English, but because you can't speak my language.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I know, Julie, you speak multiple languages, so you comprehend, you at least at comprehension level for multiple
I know how to
languages.
say please and thank you and help in several different languages.
Surely you can order steak.
Right? Yes, I can order steak and avoid eating fish and all kinds of things like
George,
that. But
one language thing I've experienced over time is there's classroom learning of a language, and then there's sort of business environment learning, and I guess technical jargon and ways of talking about technology, IT topics. Is that a big leap, or is that for people for yourself, or maybe other people you've worked with? Is that a smaller hurdle?
Good question. So there are a couple of things. Like when you're learning, there's there's so many things going through my head. So one thing as a teacher, so first I just pinpointed differences. One thing as a teacher, whether you teaching in English or teaching in native language. For once, I'm native Russian Ukrainian speaker, and I wouldn't dare to teach subjects in Ukrainian or Russian. I understand. I can speak fluently. My technical side of things, jargon, is just not good enough. I probably can. I never actually tried. I prefer teaching in English because I learn in English, so it's kind of, I don't have to translate, I don't have to adjust. I just relay what I learned and put my words on top of that. So for me, little difference. I should probably try. It's kind of good, would be good exercise to try and learn for me to learn to teach in Russian or Ukrainian.
I have an audience for you, George.
We can certainly try. We can certainly try. No promises.
I remember Dave was teaching in some random European country. It had to have been close to 15 years ago. And during the break, somebody came up to him, and it was like the brave one who wanted to come talk to him. And they're like, "What is this .net?" And Dave's like, he wrote it down. And he's like, "Oh, point net."
Point net. Yes. The
That
one
cleared
thing
up
I
like 3
find
hours of confusion, right?
Exactly. And then suddenly everybody understood what Dave had been talking about all morning.
one thing I find that as a teacher, when I teach, for example, Ukrainian, Russian, or any, in fact, Eastern European, Slavic languages specifically, learners, native speakers in Slavic languages, I I can understand what they might be struggling with. So when they ask the question, I can see where the question is coming from. I would see that this .NET and .NET difference, um, and I would answer the question much quicker or explain the difference and say, "Oh, do not translate this literally. This is how it's translated," and things like that. So that part is, I find that me knowing both languages definitely very, very helpful. So continuing on the subject, learning in different environments, learning as a native speaker in your native language, it's useful for learning if your intent is to continue working in that language, in that environment. For example, again, I'm referring to Southeast Asia because whenever you go, knowing local language is a must, and um, you wouldn't have career if you don't speak or can do the technology part in native language, right? So it's important that you learn in that language as well. You learn the jargon. That's what I feel personally, that I'm short in knowing the translation of the words, of the terminology, how to structure sentences, specifically in Russian language, to relay my knowledge of Power Platform. This is the first time we mentioned Power Platform. That's something. Um, we've been talking for almost 30 minutes, and it's just the first time it came up. Brilliant. Um, so there's one, and there's a huge difference between learning technology as a student versus learning business environment. I don't have specific tips because I remember my struggle to work in the environment when I just moved. My English wasn't nowhere near acceptable level, so I found myself doing double shifts, learning English and working the entire day, speaking to people in English, trying to comprehend. That was struggle for a little while. So prepare for some hard work. If you're these days is much easier. So back there were no resources available to learn. Library was your resource, right? And tapes were your resource to learn language. These days, it's so much easier. You can ask for translation. You can ask for pronunciation. Learn that right mouse click, how to pronounce the word. Pronounce it for me. So learn that. Use that. Use online resources to learn how to pronounce things and try to remember those. It's still a lot of extra work. I wouldn't say double, but it's a lot of extra work as you learn a language. But believe me, you'll get better. I work with development teams. I can see progression, like how far people go within a team in like 6 months, starting from very broken English to comfortably maintaining conversation for 10-15 minutes, whether it's technical subject or not. But all of them do one thing: they put some extra effort into learning the language. Good thing is listen to news, read the books, just immerse yourself in a specific language if you want to be proficient in it. Well, we're talking probably English, but so that's probably my tips. And the other thing is that most people, vast majority of people, will try to help, will try to understand, will try to help. They will be very compassionate and tolerant. That's vast majority. There'll always be jackasses. That has nothing to do with languages, right?
And that has nothing to do with the person who's trying
Yeah,
to learn a new language.
absolutely. Do not take it personally. If someone behaves like a jackass, they would behave the same way, whether it's English or,
And if they do it in a technology event where any of us are there, come find us. We got your back.
oh yeah. And if any of us presented, we would put put them in their place. So don't underestimate community that will support you. Yeah, so I'd say go out there, find yourself mentor, learn, try things out. People will help you out. And if you see people struggling to understand you, that's not because they're struggling to understand you. That's because they're adjusting their hearing. That's all to it. Remember that trick. And if that fails, imagine your audience naked and it all falls into places.
No, I definitely do that, George. If I'm having trouble understanding someone because they have an accent, I definitely have to listen a little bit, and then I can adjust. And I would say that one thing native English speakers are pretty good at is getting past accents. Maybe, I don't know, maybe more so than people who speak other languages natively, because we hear so many accents so frequently just in our daily lives and certainly at conferences. So yeah, that's great advice I can certainly agree with it. Also, I did want to touch on, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but I guess you started to talk about just that, maybe the flip side of what you were just saying, which is seeing people get discouraged, or if they do feel overwhelmed and they kind of can't, even in the middle of a class or in the middle of a business meeting, even feel like they can't talk anymore. They've run out of sort of mental strength, perhaps, or confidence. Do you see that often? And I don't know, do you have any other advice in those situations?
That's a tough one. You can experience that regardless whether you native speaker or not. It's just
That's
the
true.
workload. The lockups are quite common, and speaking in foreign language definitely makes it worse, because suddenly all the words are gone from your head, and all the expressions that you learned and all the training that you put in suddenly all seem to evaporate. The best advice I would give: ask for a break. Seriously. Like, when you take that bag and you inhale through the bag. In case people don't know, you don't. It seems counterintuitive, right? You take the bag and you start breathing into the bag. The idea of the bag is to deprive you of oxygen, right? To increase CO2 concentration so that you slow down. That's the effect, right? You start depriving yourself of oxygen, you start kind of falling into sleep, so to speak. It slows your heart rate down, it calms you down. That's the idea of the bag. So think of a break as this paper bag. You need to calm down. Don't hesitate to ask for 5-minute recess. If you put on the spot, ask for recess. And I don't know what kind of absolute asshole someone needs to be not to allow visibly struggling non-native speaker not to allow take few minutes recess. What's your experience, Julie?
Well, I would hope that as a trainer in the front of the room, I would recognize that and not make them ask for it. But absolutely, if asked, then yep, everybody takes 5 minutes, and we don't have to point any fingers at anybody.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Having the time for a break.
Definitely. If you're in a learning environment, someone is presenting, it's your job as a trainer to recognize the struggle and offer that break, right? Or help them out of this whole takeover, give them kind of invisible break for a couple minutes to catch their breath. I was talking about situations where you can be put in the spotlight, like business meetings and things like that. I'm saying, like, do not hesitate. my cat having a heart attack. I don't know.
Yeah, just any, by all means, find the place you need to regroup, right? So if it's, you know what, I need to go to use the bathroom,
Yeah,
right? No one's going
definitely.
to fault you for that, and nobody's going to be in there watching you to see what you're doing. If you're just taking a moment to yourself to slow down your breath and center yourself, and then come back, everyone understands the need for a break.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need to use AI in the meantime to, find that magic word that you couldn't, by all means.
Well, I'm just going to ask George if you had any final thoughts, any words of wisdom. We've covered a lot of different aspects of a non-native English language learner's journey. Um, any words of wisdom, any random thing that popped into your head that really helped you that you wanted to mention?
Can I share one thing that just before I forget? One thing I've learned today so far is that I think there's something here to learn if you're a non-native speaker and you are facing this challenge of working in English, and maybe you've listened this far, and thank you. But I would say also, if you're someone who has to do some sort of teaching or presenting in an audience that is either all non-native English or has people in the audience who are non-native English speakers and are trying to keep up and trying to understand you, that this, hopefully there's a few tidbits in this that you can learn too. Sorry, George, go ahead.
I was Incidentally, I was going to say kind of along the similar line. So, as a teacher, just to summarize, be aware of the cultural differences because it will help you tremendously understand why students are not responding, for example, in the same way English speakers would. That's one thing. Two, something I didn't mention, find yourself a reasonable speaker, English speaker within that community. It could be proctor, could be a person helping you, could be a student, someone who's reasonably proficient in English. Use them as your helper to translate or trying to understand. When people start asking questions, look up to them. They will help you out to understand because they understand what the other person might be struggling with translating specific terms or whatever. So they will relate to you. Find this helper within your little community class, within class. Typically, it's proctor would be good, or local person who organizes that, helping you out. But find a student that you can kind of lean on, and they will help you out. Um, as a student, uh, don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Most people are there to help you. Uh, Slow a little bit, particularly if your native language is fast. Slow down a little bit because it will stop you from mumbling the words, makes it difficult to understand. If you're not sure how to pronounce word, just slow down and pronounce it the way you would. Chances are 90% chances are people will understand you. So if not, try to find synonym, try to explain. So try to elaborate what you meant. So don't
Well,
don't get hung up on things like
on
real.
one single word, I should be able to use the context of the rest of your sentence to infer what that word is that you're trying to pronounce.
Oh yeah.
So don't stress over a word.
Number of times I just gave up when our devs saying report. I just gave up. I said, how many times, guys? It's report. It's not, and it's just useless. It's just many times, and I just gave up and say, hey, look, the our most people, English speakers within our team, they understand what you mean. It's good enough for me, right? So, and that's the attitude most people take. So, as a student, as presenters, as upcoming presenter, find yourself a buddy, find yourself a mentor who will help you out.
And realize that even native English speakers have crashed and bombed at a conference presentation a time or two.
Yeah, and take the pride in little fact that a lot of non-native speakers learn their language from the written words. That makes them much better spellers than native English speakers. Speaking from the experience, I find all the time that a lot of English speakers are just not very good spellers. It's not critical these days, not frowned upon as it was years ago, but take pride in that. Your spelling will be better on average.
So, George, I really appreciate you joining us again. It's always fun to chat with you, and now we get to record our conversations for others to hear when we chat.
Much, guys. Thanks for having me. It's been fun, and this is the topic very dear to me. So thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us once again in the Biz Apps Classroom. Thanks also to George Doubinski for being here. If you want to support the podcast and improve your skills in the Dynamics and Power Platform space, we have a special offer for you on an annual plan at 365.training. Check out the link in the show notes. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us by email, julie@365.training or jason@msdynamicsworld.com. We'll see you again soon in the Biz Apps Classroom.